Hi, friend. Niklas here from Your Audio Solutions. Hope you're doing well. It's a pleasure talking to you this week again. On the show today, we have the best lady in guitar shredding, Mrs. Smith. If you don't know Mrs. Smith's background, she was actually kidnapped by a Norwegian death metal band, and it was in her captivity that she developed her mad guitar skills. But we will delve into this more in the interview that you will hear in a second. Also, not that long ago, she battled Metallica's lead guitarist, Kirk Hammett. And I'm sure you know Metallica, you know Kirk Hammett, legendary band, legendary guitarist. But not that long ago, she battled him in a wah-off. You can watch it online. I'll leave a link to it below. We talk about this in the interview as well. But it was pretty cool wah-off, so to speak. Who can be the best wah-wah abuser? You know, because Kirk Hammett has this reputation of being a wah-wah abuser, basically. So Mrs. Smith challenged him, and he accepted. It's a cool video. I'll leave a link for you to check out. It was a pleasure talking to Mrs. Smith. She's a killer guitarist, and if you haven't checked out her music, I can recommend that you do so. I'll leave a link to it below as well. I myself is not that into guitar shredding, but actually listening to more of Mrs. Smith playing and her talking about shredding actually opened my eyes for shredding, you know, being a guitar shredder, for whatever that means. But in this interview with Mrs. Smith, we talked about, again, guitar shredding. We talked about her missing cat, Carlyle, who's been missing since last Tuesday. We talked about guitar players such as Steve Vai and Yngwie Malmsteen. We spoke about Tiger King and why she thinks that's a disgraceful show. And again, we talked about her being kidnapped by the Norwegian death metal band and how she got saved. Again, talked about the Kirk Hammett wah-off. You know, she had a killer band. That's the backing band, so to speak, for whatever word you want to use, was Rob Trujillo, who's also from Metallica. John Theodore, who was in Mars Volta. I think he's in Queens of the Stone Age these times. We also spoke about how she recorded her previous EP, introducing Mrs. Smith at home, and how she only used like her interface, really small interface, and used amp simulator. And we talked about using amp sims versus real amps, for example. I myself prefer using real amps, but Mrs. Smith got pretty awesome tones from using the amp simulator. So that's pretty cool. She also shared some details about her up-and-coming album. You know, there might be more vocals in it and stuff like that. And I think you're going to love this interview. She also brought out her cat keyboard, which you see her play a bit. And we talked about her cat pedal, which I thought was a cat pedal. It was actually a Japanese talking guitar pedal, so to speak. So we talk about that too. But before we get into the interview, I want to let you know about a free guide you can download right away. It's called 3 Tested Ways to Increase Your Client Base. And I made this guide for home studio owners or freelancers or people who work in a recording studio and you want to increase your client base. So there's a tip on how to contact bands online. There's my email script of how I do it. There's also how I find clients in real life and how to get clients coming back for more. And I think you're going to love this guide. It's free. Link to that in the description below. To send you email address and I'll send it to you right away. But that's it. Let's get into the interview with Mrs. Smith. Awesome, Mrs. Smith. Welcome to the show, the podcast.
Hello, good to be here.
Pleasure talking to you. I've been enjoying your guitar playing for the last few weeks, or actually more than that, to be honest. And I was watching your the State of Shred address you did.
Oh yes,
I loved it, you know, and we're gonna get into this more in the interview, I think, about shredding, because that's so opposite from my world. But you made it so compelling when I watched that your address, so to speak. And I love when you played Steve Vai's The Riddle. Because
yes.
I never heard that before, and it was very poetic, his playing.
Very melodic, very. Of course, he's throughout the song. There's a bass line that stresses just one note, the low E. Do 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 do. And so what he's able then to do is to layer modal textures. So he's constantly shifting modes around the center of E.
Right.
He goes in and out of Lydian and Mixolydian and blues things and whatever. But at one point it climaxes into a kind of melodic minor or Phrygian dominant, I think maybe it would be.
Wow.
So, but the idea being with just that one bass note, it's limitless really, because you could play anything on top of one note.
Yeah, exactly.
Very creative.
Yeah, it's very cool. I got to check out the rest of the album. I haven't done that yet, but it's on my list. The quarantine list.
if you like music production, the production on that album is really astounding. It really holds up. The sound of the guitars, the mixing, the mastering, the drums, and it's just layers and layers and layers of guitars, but also other instrumentation and it all sounds quite warm. It all has a warm sound, and a lot of hard rock guitar can be very piercing,
right.
Especially of that era, the 80s and type thing can be very kind of piercing, but there's a warmth around it. It's quite intense. It's very good.
Yeah, it's really cool. Did you ever get into Steve Vai's playing when he was in Zappa's band?
I haven't explored that quite as much. I admire and respect Frank Zappa. It's a little bit like I hear one or two songs and I'm good. I don't need to keep going. I like the use of humor, of course. He's a very intelligent man. Everything's very intricate, but it's not not something I need to revisit often, I have to say.
Yeah, I feel the same, to be honest.
That's just personal preference. That's nothing to say about the quality.
No.
It's obviously high quality and very interesting music. And he's a genius and brilliant. But I don't revisit it after one or two listens.
Right. It's a funny thing because I've been browsing online, obviously, and some people think you are Steve Vai or something. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have. It's because I played this guitar.
Oh yeah, of course.
And perhaps the cheekbones,
right.
But I'm only 5'8". He's 6'4".
Wow.
Of course, whenever you're on stage, you seem bigger than you really are.
Right.
It's funny when you meet people and they're famous and they're very, very short. And of course, my hair gives me additional height. It's an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
But no, I met him. He's very sweet. He's very supportive.
Nice.
Of course, I'm playing in his style. I'm inspired by him. Perhaps would consider myself a student of his style.
Right.
But I also think I've evolved my own playing style as I've gone on, as one must do. I think he is perhaps the player who's spawned the most successful proteges. I think he's had the most effective impact on players. So, for instance, Pliny sounds a lot like Steve Vai often. You could listen to Pliny and think it is Steve Vai at times.
Right.
Now, the production, the gent style, Steve Vai doesn't do that type of thing.
Right.
So that throws you. And there's a little bit of an edge, but there's a note choice, there's a phrasing choice, there's little things, the way the whammy bar is used, where you think, oh, clearly this person is a fan.
Right.
Edith Strauss has cited Steve Vai as quite an influence. She's very successful. Very, very successful.
Oh, yeah, I think I know her, actually. Did she play with Michael Jackson or something? That's not her, maybe.
Well, that's Orianthi, who I would also say is inspired by. I mean, he's just spawned a lot of students. He's like the master of the dojo, and then go forth as little warriors.
Right.
And each person, of course, has to evolve. Just as there are many people who sound a lot like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Sure.
John Mayer often sounds a lot like Joe Bonamassa. Often you could think that's Eric Johnson.
There's a funny thing with Joe Bonamassa.
He's like Eric Johnson meets Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah, there's also his he says it himself. He's some for some reason he's people either love him or hate him for some reason. But sometimes his guitar playing resonates with me. Sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. I have a love-hate relationship with his playing for some reason. You know.
I think very impressive. I think his tone is very impressive.
Yeah.
I think the way he brings a kind of shredding into the blues is really exciting. It's something that has to be done. Although I would say my two major influences would be Jimi Hendrix and Steve Vai, and I consider myself mostly a blues player with some shredding sort of tricks and little doodads sprinkled on top, but I'm always returning to that pentatonic scale, the pentatonic blues scale. I'm always returning to that box. I don't mind being in that box. I don't feel trapped in that box. I feel liberated. But Joe Bonamassa is very successful. I think he has confidence.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of confidence was valued in the 80s, but has since a little bit gone out of style.
Right. Yeah. I guess so. I mean, I don't know. Like, there's so many subgenres now where there's a niche, but it's still a big audience, it seems like, which is kind of cool.
He has a huge audience because I think people who like the blues, Eric Clapton created a renaissance of the blues. Of course, the blues is an African-American style of music, and it belongs to that community. But it doesn't mean that only people in that community can play it. Clearly, Eric Clapton received fame for playing the blues, and when he was on a platform, he turned around and said, "Well, if you like me, you'll really like B.B. King." And in a way used his great privilege to spotlight the people that had inspired him. Those people then saw an incredible resurgence in their popularity because Eric Clapton was the hip young kid from London who was, on all the TV shows. He made the blues cool again. So there's a lot of people who want to hear that music. And it's obvious, it's just clear when you see the footage of Joe Bonamassa on stage. There's a very large audience. I also think that he has built through his many years.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been a grassroots thing for him.
Yeah, exactly.
So people don't like a success. People are jealous. A lot of guitar players are sort of stuck in their bedrooms, and so they just want to sort of trash talk. He has some confidence, but I've seen nothing about him that is objectionable in the least.
Oh, same, actually.
He's in many ways a self-made man. You know what I mean? And you have to admire that. A lot of hard work.
Yeah, for sure. This might be a stupid question, but that's all right, I guess. When I see shredders, whatever you want to call it, I don't know if that's a cat. Is that Carlyle? Did he come back?
It's Carlyle. He didn't come back. This is a representation of Carlyle.
Nice.
But his soul is sort of connected to this representation. So it allows me to sort of not keep track of him perfectly, but I can tell his mood. I can say, oh, he's bored again.
Right.
He's bored. He's playing with a piece of lint.
Right.
Or he's looking at a little bird and going.
So what's that cat's name? Is that also Carlyle number 2, maybe?
Actually, the name of this is also Carlyle.
Ah.
That's funny. Let's say that.
But so, what happened to Carlyle? Because I know you lost him, right? Was that the case?
Carlyle went missing 2.5 years ago last Tuesday.
Last Tuesday.
The exact circumstances of how he went missing, I cannot talk about on this any program, because it will hinder our attempts to find him.
Right.
Because if you put it out there, then the culprits know.
I see.
There was the original culprit, then there was a sub-culprit because that person, something happened. It was my psychic told me she just sparks and the smell of gunfire, not that the person was killed with gunfire, but there was gunfire discharged and then possibly falling over into some kind of a water. She keeps saying, I see water, I see water. Whenever I ask her a question, she says, I see water, I smell water. I said, there's water everywhere.
Wow.
But
how do you smell water?
The sub-culprit. Then Carlyle escaped from the sub-culprit and is now just lollygagging, traipsing. He's traipsing.
Wow.
He's traipsing. He's torturing me. But anyway, you had a question about
Yeah,
shredders.
actually, let's get into that later. So, because before you said, you meet your heroes, they're smaller than you think. Was that the case when you? This is part of another question, to be honest, but doesn't really matter. Was that the case when you met Kirk Hammett and you did a waff, as you said? Was he shorter or taller?
He is a slightly shorter than one would think, simply because he's always photographed from below.
Is he?
Well, rock stars are always on stage, and the photographers are down in a pit,
Right,
so they're
right.
always looking upwards. And actually, I dislike this about rock photographers because they're always getting the double chin and and I end up looking huge. So in fact, there's a height requirement for my band members, over 6'2". But he was very, very low key.
Oh yeah.
Very sweet, very, very, very sweet person. Of course, I knew that from his public profile, but you never know how people are backstage. And we never sort of tell tales about backstage. But what I can say is if you're a fan of Metallica and you think Kirk Hammett is absolutely sweet as pie, I'm here to tell you that my experience of him is 100%. He is a kind, generous, very nice person. There's no diva antics backstage, nothing like that. A fantastic guitar player. He has an absolutely top-notch team around him.
Right.
Really terrific professional people. Of course, you don't get to that level if you've got a bad attitude, right? So we've got very professional people who are also just very, very kind.
Yeah.
And it really was his staff, members of his staff who were compelled by this idea, the fun of the idea of a wah-off. This Kirk Hammett is a very busy person, not just with his Metallica commitments, but he has several art shows always going on. He has a family, of course. And so they kept bringing it up and saying, let's keep this going. Let's keep the planning going. So it took some time. But he was so very kind and very open. We said, how are we going to make this happen, this competition? What are the rules? How do we know if I've won a point and you've won a point? It had to be worked out.
Right.
And so he was absolutely open to all ideas. The band was so fantastic.
Yeah, of course.
These are top-notch rock musicians of the highest order. So for me, it was surprisingly a pleasure. Of course, you go in there nervous. What if I'm not good enough? What if I make a mistake? What if I say something silly? You don't want to fangirl out on people too early. Eventually, you have to. But and eventually, I did. I did have a chance to tell him what his work means to me, what Metallica means to me, how his band comports themselves means to me, and also what it meant to me that he was willing to do this competition. That I was very grateful, and this is not something he had to do, and I believe he did it because it would be fun, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's still a dream of mine to be able to talk to one of the guys in Metallica. But I was fortunate enough to interview Bob Rock, who I'm sure you know.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and that was also cool. And yeah, they're, as you say, they're super nice, and it's awesome to be able to tell someone how much they mean to you, musically, I guess. That's an incredible thing.
Well, and I have an unpopular opinion about Metallica to some extent, which is I love that Black album.
Yeah, same.
It's my favorite album of theirs simply because I'm really not a heavy metaler.
Right.
I'm not. I appreciate, for instance, Megadeth, and there's some progressive metal that I like, but just the long songs of just it's just I understand the trance of it. I understand why people like it. They put it on and they get into a ritualistic state. It's really more like religious ritual, especially when it's combined with a live performance and a mass experience. And so they're headbanging and they're in the pit and the music is loud and it's repetitive and it's escalating. So it is not to say that I don't understand the importance of it, because if you do not have these mass rituals, mass societies explode in other ways. So it absolutely is a valid art form. It's a necessary art form. It's a high art form. It's not easy. I'm not dissing it at all. It simply is not to my preference. I like a song. I love that 3.5 minute, 4 minute song where there's a journey, and it's the intro, the verse, the pre-chorus, the chorus, another verse, then a solo, and then the final outro. And they, with that Black Album and Bob Rock's help, they took all that heavy metal awesomeness and really were more played with this idea of form, of song form. And I told Kirk that. I said, I loved one. I performed one in my live show.
Yep.
And I love it. I think it's an amazing work of art. I said, just the idea of penetrating that experience of being trapped in your own body. Of course, everybody lives with that nightmare that could happen to you. I'd be in a car accident or a piano would fall on me. And so I told him how much it meant to me, that song, the creativity of the video, the creativity of the narrative, the film. What is this film? I've got to go now watch this film. How cool. And I said, but really it was that Black Album. So great.
Exactly.
Great songwriting, great singing, great production.
Yeah.
That James Hetfield really rose to the challenge.
Exactly. He did, But it's also, I also love Saint Anger, to be honest. And that's a album you're not allowed to like either, I guess. But it's killer. There's some kick-ass riffs in there that I like.
People are so, of course, I think it's great to know what you like in detail and explore that and drill down. Why is it? Why do I like this? It's so interesting. But to use what you like as a weapon against other people, I think is not the best course. I think there are some general rules about taste that we can agree upon, but so much of it is preference. There are some things that are just truly universally bad. I mean, much of the pop music on the radio today is just, and I mean, we can just agree based on the rules of art. This is terrible. This sounds terrible. What it stands for is terrible. The topic of the music is terrible. The way it sounds is terrible. I don't believe that this music will last.
No, same.
And people can say, oh, you're just an old fuddy-duddy. You're stuck in your ways. Excuse me, no, because I can find music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even a little bit the early aughts. Something happens around 2008, 9, 10, 11, where we have just completely lost the idea of songwriting, originality. Music production falls off a cliff. It becomes so horrible. And it must just be stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, because I'm the same way, as you just said. You can go back to all those decades. And they always, you can tell, it just resonates with me stronger. Like you just said, I hope
there's
it's
a
better.
soul. What really is frightening to me is that there's a soul in that earlier music. There's a soulfulness. So whether you're talking about bubblegum pop from the 1950s, doo-wop, well, listen, we've all been a teenager in love.
Yeah.
We've all felt that feeling of puppy love. And those harmonized voices and the Shangri-Las, the leader of the pack. I mean, you may not like that music, but if you listen to it, you can. It might get stuck in your head. It sounds old-fashioned, but there's something you like about it. The Beach Boys, I could go on and on. The 60s, it's like the Beatles, Rolling Stones. I mean, forget it. Jimi Hendrix, you can go on and on and on. Rock and roll.
Yeah.
In the 70s, you start to get into heavy metal, even disco, even Donna Summer. Oh, I feel love, I feel love, I feel love, I feel love. There's something. You might not like that music, but she's feeling something. She's in love. The 80s, we get into Duran Duran, I love. We get into the hair metal. Some of that doesn't age as well, but it's still fun. They're having fun.
Yeah, for sure.
But today, it just is, I don't know what world these people are living in. I don't know what their concerns are. Do they love anyone but themselves?
No one knows.
Do they want anything but status, money, power, superiority? The values are materialism.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Instagram likes, I guess, followers, whatever.
It's a bad spot.
Yeah.
But luckily people can make music on their own with their computer. I have an album that I put out. I recorded it on a computer. And people can't believe me when I tell them that.
Is that the EP you did, introducing Mrs. Smith, or?
Yes.
Cool. So you just did that at home?
Yes, that was done mostly in Logic Pro.
Yeah. So.
Yep. So the instruments are mostly MIDI. Some bass lines were recorded analog, real bass player. The drums are Logic drums. Now, they were mixed, and the important thing about those Logic drums, you've got to use the producer kits. The producer kits will break out every drum, every instrument as a separate track, so things can be compressed and mixed more precisely. And then most of the guitars were direct into the computer with a very unimpressive.
That's okay. That's fine.
People can't believe it.
Yeah.
They can't believe it. Really, think for a second that in your computer you have as much technology as Brian Wilson had.
Yeah, exactly.
When he recorded Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
Now, you may not have, you may not have the wrecking crew at your disposal to play the instruments for you, but really, you have an entire orchestra. Now, how do you make it sound organic? How do you make it sound, to me, a lot of the guitar music I hear now has it's very overly precise. So it's kind of cold, it's very sort of trapped. It's kind of trapped inside of these overly rigid measures and the stuff. So that's, again, it's not to my preference, but it is somewhat style.
I mean, I'm struggling to use the virtual amps. Then I can never. It doesn't resonate with me for some reason. But some people can, like yourself, can make it sound pretty badass. But yeah, I just never.
I got some tones from the amps inside Logic that I would sit down to record a demonstration lead. I would say, all right, well, I'll go back and record this with an amp and a mic. Because what I had done is I'd record the demos, and then I did a GoFundMe and hired an engineer. And I would go out to his home studio, and we would set up the amp. I would bring the amp out on the train, on the New Jersey Transit, and he would come pick me up. Such a sweet kid. But I thought, well, I'll record all of these lead lines again. And then once we got them he started to mix them. He said, I don't see why you need to re-record any of these. They sound great. And some of them had little even imperfections I left in. Now, I in hindsight, I wish I had not left those imperfections in somewhat. Not that I should have cleaned them up virtually, but maybe I could have. I don't know. I felt a sense of obligation to leave imperfections in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good. That's what makes it human, obviously, in the end. There's one thing when it comes to shredding. And I don't know if you identify as a shredder or not. I don't know if you are the typical shredder. You can shred, obviously. But people always use delay. And I never understood, why do shredders use so much delay when they shred? Is it like the wah thing, where like overuse wah? Is it to cover up stuff? What's the approach with the delay in shredding?
Well, I think it makes things more dimensional. I think it adds a sense of drama, a sense of space to things. I think it can also artificially create a flurry of notes, perhaps. So maybe that's what you're talking about. Is it there to cover certain things up? So I don't know what's in other people's minds. I think a dry guitar can be very interesting. It can sound very raw, very punk rock. It depends what you're going for. I think often shredders want to be epic. They're guitar heroes. They want to be on the top of a mountain, issuing forth notes, like lightning bolts from Zeus, or Jove, if you will, depending upon which culture. But then again, the idea of the guitar hero has changed. The nouveau guitar heroes are more low-key humble.
Mm-hmm.
They play more of that. They don't want to be misconstrued for an 80s style shredder. So there's things have changed. Changed.
Yeah, for sure. What's this guy's name? The Swedish Yngwie Malmsteen. My
Yes. Oh, one of the
countryman. He
yes.
was a big influence on you, right?
Yes. Oh, I wouldn't say a big influence. I mean, I will always bust out a Frisian dominant when I'm feeling bored or when I want to add some spice. A song that I'm working on recently has a lot. Actually, I've been working with a lot of minor seconds, and I don't know why. I think because we're in such a dark world,
Right.
and I think, no, Mrs. Smith, get into some R&B or funk or some disco or blues. Don't make everything so dark. But then the guitar, the hands, they just want to go to this dark place.
Right.
So it's fantastic. Always a fun diminished lick. I think he's a virtuoso, a creator of an original style. Maybe didn't create it, but was the one who refined it and spread it, the most effectively. He's a fantastic rock star. He's sort of frightening and amazing and maybe like horrible to his own fans. I'm in favor of all of that. I'm in favor of anything. What I respect about Yngwie is he is authentically himself.
Right.
And, it might be more, more people might like you if you were nicer, and if when they came up to you in a bar, you were cool and low key, and he's just not going to play that game. And I think that's marvelous. Why would you approach a Viking? You wouldn't approach Thor in a bar. Hey, Thor, you're my pal. Lightning bolts. He'd blow you away.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that may not be the most Swedish behavior. Swedes are known for their good humor and their sense of propriety, I believe. Not necessarily warm people, but not rude, I don't think.
No, I mean, you're not allowed to stick out. That's the Swedish rule,
That's the Swedish, and yes, and I grew somewhat accustomed to that by living in Minnesota, actually.
Oh, yeah.
There's many Swedes settled in Minnesota. There's even a little town. A little town where there's Swedish, the signs are in Swedish.
Right, yeah.
Swedish food and Swedish restaurants, and people still speak the language there, and so I'm familiar with that. Now it's Swedish, and I want to say also there's a lot of Finnish there as well.
Oh, okay.
And I came up against that don't stand out thing, which makes public relations very difficult. Yeah. It's very hard to. And I found it very strange because if you're doing art, you have to stand out. Now, does that mean you think you're better than everyone else? You might a little bit. You sort of have to think you have to think that. You have to have some grandiosity.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you bother. Why would you bother to put yourself out there? Now, it's not in good taste to express that openly. But the Swedes, they will not have it. Now, let's see. Swedes also have, of course, Ghost and ABBA. So putting a lot of music out there.
Yeah, I mean, Ghost is awesome.
The ABBA of hard rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, they did I'm a marionette, just a marionette, pull my strings. Da, 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 da. Ghost did a cover of that. And I think Tobias Forge is amazing. I think he understands the power of nostalgia without being shtick.
For sure.
Which is very important to my project as well. So I think about them a lot. I wish I could write hooks like that. Just wish I could write a song like See the Light or some of my other favorites by them. Miasma, their instrumental super song with the saxophone.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's very it's so interesting because the songwriting is deadly serious. The presentation is deadly serious, but there is this point where it tips slightly. It doesn't go to camp, but it is clear that there's a sense of humor there and a sense of intelligence. It's not a parody of a death metal band. It's not like the Steel Panther of death metal. There's so many things, and I think why it's so similar to what I do, where there's so many things where when you approach Ghost, you think you know what it is. And if you were to simply see an image, and not hear the music, you would never fully understand the breadth of it. And so I think that's what the power of it. I think it's what can make it difficult. Why? But clearly they're doing fine. I mean, they're selling out huge venues.
Exactly.
He's providing a lot of income to the Swedish social democratic system.
Yeah.
90% taxation rate.
Almost.
ABBA provided health care to Sweden for decades.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for the music, ABBA.
Exactly. That's funny. So, yeah, I dropped the ball there. But yeah, thanks to ABBA for healthcare. That's a good quote. So, when it comes to your own music, obviously we talked about Steve Vai being an inspiration. Is there anything that we wouldn't think about where you draw inspiration from?
Well, I think I'm as much influenced by alternative music of the 90s as I am by shredder music. So and there's many reasons for that which I can't talk about. But I think that you'll hear inside my music strains of Pink Floyd. That's of course the 90s, but I love the grunge era. I really do. I think it's the last great era of rock and roll. It's the last great era of punk and blues inspired rock and roll in terms of it being on the radio and on MTV. So I think in my singing, in some of the production of my songs, you might hear some like Nine Inch Nails. You might hear a little, David Bowie. Love David Bowie. Would never compare myself to him, but all of those things, they kind of mix and merge. And then there just is one's own instrument. There just is what one can do vocally. I'm not just a guitar player. I'm a singer.
I heard you sing. Sounds great.
One vocal song on my album, but more to come. And in my live show, I sing as much as I play guitar. So I see myself more as like a Jimi Hendrix guitar or Prince guitar player singer. And so there just is what one can do, the limitations of one's instrument, of one's vocal range, of one's guitar ability, and then also the glories of that. My voice can do this, so I'm going to write for that. I can play this. I can't play that, so you're not going to hear that. So this is what I can play. And so all of those things come into play if you are exploring your instrument, if you are playing outside your comfort zone, if you are stretching yourself, if you're stretching your compositional abilities, if you're stretching your abilities of production on the computer, if you're stretching your abilities as a singer, playing in different styles, not getting stuck just doing the same stuff. For me, it's sort of like, it's interesting to play, for instance, for my management team, a song where they say, well, that doesn't sound like Mrs. Smith. And I go, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That interests me, fascinating.
Yeah.
Let's keep going there.
Because I heard you sing, or you were just singing the notes. It was a YouTube clip I saw, and it sounded awesome. I was like, good. And you were talking about, the importance of merging your voice with your guitar and how you learned that. Maybe I'm wrong here. But when you were captured by the Norwegian people.
Yes, I'm happy to talk about Swedes. I'm happy to talk
but
about
not Norwegians.
of course, the outrageous alcohol problem in Finland. I'm praying for all of them. The terrible crime rate there, highest crime rate in the Scandinavian countries.
In Finland?
Yes.
How do you know that?
I was married to a criminologist. It's because it seems as if there's a genetic predisposition for alcoholism in the male population. Because, of course, we know Scandinavian countries are social democracies. Now, some of your listeners may not be aware of what a social democracy is. A social democracy is a capitalist economy that has a lot of regulation and a very strong social safety net and a strong degree of social cohesion. So you would find these principles at work in the Scandinavian countries as well as in Canada, Germany, not in the United States. And I think we're paying dearly for that. Now, people think if there's a social democracy, this is socialism. It's not. Socialism is the state running all industries, everything being nationalized. Okay. Now, in Sweden, I assume your healthcare is nationalized. Maybe elements of your banking are nationalized. Your finance sector, I would
I'm
assume,
not sure
is
about that
heavily.
actually, but maybe.
I assume there's heavy regulation on the finance sector.
Probably.
Again, I don't know. You have to have some things be uh, common, part of the commons. There are some things that are public services. And again, we're not doing this in the United States, and boy, are we paying for it right now with this coronavirus. But anyway, back to Norway. I was kidnapped by a Norwegian death metal band and held for ransom for 3 months in a closet with nothing but a guitar. There were tapes, there were CDs, but I couldn't see what they were. So when people say, "You sound like Steve Vai," I said, "I don't know. I didn't see the CD. I just put it in. I heard something intriguing, something mysterious, something powerful. And then I put in other CDs and I said, I don't want that. I don't like that." And so it may be there was a guitar that was discarded, tossed into that closet. It was discarded. Why was it discarded?
I don't know.
Who did what? And I consider the Norwegians my shadow allies. I would like to return to Norway.
Oh yeah.
It would be so triggering that I don't know what would happen because, like ABBA, this Norwegian death metal band, I got out of the closet, I took over the band, and we went in a very pop direction. We went in a very different direction. And we went to the Eurovision contest, and we trailed by police, trailed by Interpol, trailed by the CIA, in disguise, very Scooby-Doo in a lot of ways, performing, and the police are pointing at the stage. That's her. That's them. They're the criminals. I didn't set fire to those churches. I was the victim. That's her. And I remember the detective, because it was like we had a thing, right? It was like he caught my eye, and I was singing like this, like the devil, and I had my hair teased out, the death metal witch, and I was screaming, and I caught his eye, and he had a mustache, this Norwegian detective, and he looked at me like this, and he said, "I'm going to save you." And there was a part of me that was like, "Help me."
Yeah.
Help. I almost said like, "Help," before going back to my death metal persona.
Was there some romance there, or there was no romance?
There was no overt romance. And later we lost them. We get in the black van. We go back to the house, in the woods, the safe house, the hideout house. Somehow in the celebration, a fire got started, and I don't know why, because I was trying to open the door, and it locked, and so they were pounding, and I was pounding, and I was on the outside. And I remember looking through, and they had put bars on the windows to keep me in. Now they were kept in. And I remember the rhythm guitarist, who I never liked and who could never play in the pocket, the flames and the screams and the skin melting. And I thought to myself, as I backed away, and with the cold air, I was cool and cold, and as he was melting, I thought, you worshiped hell, and now you're in hell.
Yeah.
And something, you reap what you sow.
Yeah, sure.
And as I backed up, I backed into the detective, and I looked, and he placed his hands around me, and he said, "You're safe now." And I said, he said it in Norwegian, but for some reason I understood him. And I said, "I'll never be safe again."
Wow.
And then we went off to the copter.
Right.
Copter. So,
Yeah.
this Norway, Sweden, I can do. I could do a lot of Sweden. I could do a lot of Sweden. I could do a lot of Finland. I could dodge those,
Yeah.
drunken Finns.
Exactly.
A lot of Denmark.
But Denmark, yeah, they're a bit funny too, I guess.
What's that?
Denmark, the Danish.
The Danes. Yeah. Hamlet. I love Hamlet. Of course.
Yeah, sure.
Talk about a bloody story.
So Yeah, I don't know what my next question was. I got lost in your story there. But yeah, you were talking about Norway, and if you go to Norway, I don't know if you've seen Tiger King. Everyone has seen Tiger King these days, I guess. Have you seen it?
I really think that, and I know I was talking about taste being sort of subjective. This is a case where this is just in bad taste.
Right.
This is just in bad taste. People should not be bragging that they're fans of this show. You make a fool of yourself and everyone else in the world when you brag. If everyone was not contained by this pandemic, I would hope the show would not be nearly as popular. I think it's exploitation. I think that there has already been a documentary about exotic cat ownership, a very good one, several good ones, which people should watch.
Yeah, Louis Theroux went there actually.
And I think the plight of the animals is totally lost, and the exploitative story about the people. And people are making classist. That's right. I use the term classist jokes about people's dental problems, which I think is completely inappropriate in the United States, where we have no universal dental coverage. They are making jokes about crystal meth drug abuse, which is nothing to kid about at all. And everyone thinks they're so funny, and they're not. The joke's on you. And the people who participated in this documentary were told that it was going to be a Blackfish-style documentary exposing the abuses of this world. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't do that. No. It is simple, trashy reality TV, and I think it's quite shameful, and I think it's obvious that the filmmakers have no regard for the subjects of their own film, and I think that's the definition of a bad documentary.
Right. Yeah, you have really good points there, actually. But the Norway connection, what's his name? The guy who initially came to Joe Exotic, he was trying to make a reality show. He's now in Norway. That's how I got to Tiger King. I don't know. Okay. That's it.
I'm all for tigers being free.
Yeah.
But there's a peculiar American phenomenon, and I don't know that I don't think the show ever covered it. I only lasted one episode, but I don't think the show ever covers this strange view of nature that Americans have, where they seem to view wild animals as almost Disney cartoons.
Yeah.
And people, and you can even see it on the comments on Facebook. Oh, look at the big kitty cat. It's not a big kitty cat. It is a tiger. It is a wild animal. It belongs in the wild. It should not be cuddled. You know, people who live in proximity to these animals in nature, you know, where they are, you know, where they are from, they don't snuggle with these cats. They don't walk. You stay far away.
Exactly.
Don't cuddle. They're cuddling with the giant bear. This whole strange alienation that Americans have from nature itself speaks to our synthetic reality, and I think it will all come crashing down. The cat thing is just a symptom. It's a very frightening one.
Yeah,
but
completely.
I've never understood this. I've never understood putting them in zoos, putting them in shows, but living with it. Just you know, maybe on a safari from very far away, maybe you could view through binoculars, or a videographer with a lens zoom in. We can all watch these animals on nature programs.
Exactly.
They don't need to be brought into a home.
Exactly. I mean, because we went to what's it called, Sea World, right? And that was also disgusting to see, and sad to see the polar bears laying in this small thing. You know, it's heartbreaking, to be honest.
I remember seeing a polar bear walking in a circle, obviously having an OCD, very real trauma reaction to the containment, exhibiting a repetitive neurological behavior. It was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. Now, there is, if you're interested in exotic ownership sort of gone horribly wrong, there is a movie called Roar, which is about a 1970s filmmaker who is married to Tippi Hedren. Tippi Hedren was in The Birds, and her daughter is Melanie Griffith. Melanie Griffith is a teenager in this documentary, shot in the 70s. There are something like 50 cats, 50 of these wild cats living in their home. I mean, there's a shot where Tippi Hedren's on the telephone and a cat comes jumping through the window. Wow. They are not contained at all. And they are tormenting, tearing apart the crew. Something like 50 people were injured or maimed, or trying to make this film, they were not contained in the least. They were having their way in the house and attacking the people.
Wow.
That is more interesting in terms of what actually letting those animals do what they want to do
Yeah.
would look like. Because they weren't sedated, they weren't controlled with cages or with, electricity or anything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Check it out.
roar.
Roar, cool.
Yeah.
And we mentioned briefly your show. I mean, I guess it's on hold now because of the quarantine situation. But could you tell us a bit more about the show? I'd love to be able to see it if you ever come across to London at some point, maybe.
Yes, I've been trying to solidify a plan for a tour overseas for a while. I have toured Italy, and I've also performed in Vienna.
Right.
Austria is beautiful. I visited London, but it was very cold, and it was too short of a visit for me to really, really dig into it. But there's a possibility for me to visit Ireland and perform. I've been asked to perform there. And if that works out, I would then work to put dates together in the UK. I know I have a lot of fans there, and I feel that it would something that would resonate there. So there's two kinds of live shows I have. I do have a band,
Right.
and the band performs in New York City mostly. And so let me get rid of these little notifications that have come up.
Sure.
And so they perform with me, and we do a mix of originals, sort of jamming and improvising, and then covers, reinterpreted covers. In fact, we do an ABBA song called, what do we do? Gimme, 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 which actually Yngwie Malmsteen covers as well.
Oh, yeah.
And Madonna. So, and we do it in kind of disco, funk, jazz. We kind of mix up the genres. Almost every other measure, it's going into a new form. Great fun. We do Surfing with the Alien by Joe Satriani. We do Van Halen. We do Prince to great effect.
Cool.
So that's great fun because there's some songs that people know and love, and then ones that I may be introducing them to. The solo show is a version of that show with backing tracks and videos. Now, the videos play with my band, and a lot of times the drummer is synced to a video. He's synced to a click track, which we had to figure this out, and it was so much fun to figure out. A lot of technology. Yeah. And he has a split track, so he gets a metronome with a count in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then he's playing with the click. And then out the other speaker comes the samples from the Bob Ross technique, from Catchin. There's various meows, various sound samples. And that's all part of a video behind me of cats meowing. So the effect is fantastic. And but when I do it solo, I play with backing tracks. So that is guitar, bass, drums, some rhythm guitars. If there's a guitar harmony, it will come in. But I'm mostly playing lead and some rhythm. And I have fantastic backing track arrangements for a lot of the songs I do with the band. That allows me to tour in a way that is financially reasonable for me at my level. I'm not at the point where I can take a whole band out with me.
Right.
It's feasible because it can't be costing me all the time. This is a great cost. I don't think often the fans understand. They see someone with 50,000 followers or 150,000 followers or 500,000 followers. Listen, I've done shows with 3 people, all of whom had 500,000 followers each, and there were only 150 people in the room.
Right, yeah. That's a good point.
You do the math in terms of admission price, maybe some merch money is made, but then you have to take into account that rental of that bus, the gear, the roadies, the blah, 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 blah. So people need to understand that even people with very large profiles, it's also the case that people who can engage people's attention online do not always find that there's an audience for their live show.
Right, that's interesting, actually.
That what is interesting to someone as they're going like this, it comes to like, I'm in your neighborhood, come and see me. They might go, I don't know. And partially because in many ways they're giving the milk away for free. So who wants to buy the cow?
Right. That's a good point.
They're posting everything all the time. Why do they need to show up?
Yeah.
What do they get?
I think you've done a good job there because
I don't have that problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't seem to have that problem. So now that doesn't mean 500 people are showing up, but whenever I go out, there's a crowd. I don't need a lot of press, and I don't have a publicist. I've never had a publicist. I think perhaps there's a curiosity. We've seen the online version. What is the live show? And then they come, and the show is beyond what they ever could have imagined because I'm there. I'm interacting with them. There's stuff in the show that I don't show online.
Exactly. That's what I've gathered. Yeah.
Yes, there has to be surprises. There have to be things that are just outrageous and fantastic. One needs to know how to put a show together. And my roots are as a live performer who then learned a thing or two about the internet. But a lot of these people who are big on YouTube, they don't know how to perform live. They've never left their bedroom.
Exactly.
So they get out on stage and they're shocked because they don't even know what's going on. I don't have that problem.
That's good.
So I feel grateful, but it's all got to build. And so I'm recording new music, working with some collaborators I'm very excited about.
Cool.
I can't talk about that yet. I'm not ready.
Right.
Legally, I can talk about it. Emotionally, I'm not ready to talk about it. Okay. And working on some new video ideas and things like that. So
exciting.
Great fun.
Yes. Is there any way you can let us know when we will be hearing new music, or that's also?
I would think by the fall. Or the winter. Yeah. So I'm putting down demos now and engaging with collaborators. And then it comes to the whole recording process. And there's some other things in the works that might time with a winter release.
Cool.
So, yeah,
nice.
So we'll see.
And did you say there's going to be more vocals on this new album?
Yes, I would say it will be about 50-50.
Cool.
50-50, yeah.
Nice.
50% singing songs, 50 instrumentals.
Nice. Yeah, because I heard you sing. You can sing, it's cool.
I sang long before I played the guitar.
Right.
So sometimes, again, people discover you as there are some people who are sort of surprised to see this guitar direction from me because, I had an off-Broadway show, where I only sang. I played guitar for about 5 seconds.
Wow. Yeah.
And few people know that. So people need to know, before they go around. I don't want to say they're spreading lies, but they need to know when they're talking about someone else. This is a real person.
Yeah, exactly.
Human being, and their life can't be summed up in a sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So coming down to final question ish, in your wah off with Hammett, you had 4 wah-wahs going at one point, right?
Yes.
And I listened to it, and it sounds cool. How did you control 4 wah-wahs in one wah-wah, so to speak?
Well, and there's a shot in the video. Now, it originally was going to be 2, and then I thought, no, 3. And then I read in an interview with Kirk Hammett that he had, when recording an album, I think it was all Kick 'em All. It was called Kick 'em All.
Right.
He was recording with 3 wah-wah pedals at once.
Wow.
And I thought, well, then if he's done 3, I need to do 4. Now, what we did was, and this pedal board, I don't have it yet. It's on its way to me. And I believe there's going to be a giveaway of some sort of the original one. They've made 2. So it was Sweetwater who did that for me.
Cool.
So what we did was I knew that I could operate 4 at once if we lined them up. Okay, so just imagine trying to do this, right? That they're lined up like this, right? Wait, side by side. How do I show this to you? They're lined up side by side, right?
Yeah.
Side by side, and the cables are interconnecting them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And I knew that if we fashioned a steel plate that covered the area of all 4 at once, and we affixed it to the top of the pedals permanently with glue, I could operate all 4 at once.
Yeah.
So it's basically taking 4 pedals and operating them all simultaneously. Now, my goal, and I've seen some of the comments where people say, this sounds awful. It's supposed to sound awful.
It sounds badass to me.
It sounds bad and terrifying. We've left the world. People are so myopic online. Some of these people, I think, you really are just I don't want to say stupid, but I mean just not so bright and not culturally learned. Guitar is not just used for heavy metal and shred. It's also used by sonic youth to create glorious noise. Mm-hmm. There's something called noise art. Mm-hmm. There's something called punk rock.
Exactly.
Which is probably more punk rock than anything. And so I said, my hope, when I was talking to Sweetwater, I said, my hope is that this sounds absolutely horrible. It is like a cat shrieking into the night. And it was. And I knew that it would have a chance of winning. It would just be more outrageous than anything else.
Yeah, and you killed Kirk with it, so.
That's right. He couldn't top it.
Exactly. How can you? He even had a big wah-wah, but it wasn't enough.
That's right.
But just a quick question, actually, because I saw you playing with a cat sounding a pedal. Do you still have that thing? Because that sounded pretty fun. Is it that one? That's perfect. Nice.
There we go. A Frisian dominant. That's a keyboard. It's not a pedal.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have the Miku pedal?
Say that again.
The Miku pedal?
Miku.
That's the pedal that speaks in Japanese.
Is it? I thought it was actually a cat sound.
No. It's Japanese phrases.
Wow.
Mine broke. I don't have it anymore. Wow. But yes, you can look it up. Other people have attempted to make music with it. They failed completely. I'm the only one. I saw a review and they said this is the most unmusical pedal. It's completely impractical. And I said I'm going to prove them wrong, and I did.
You did. I mean, I thought it sounded pretty cool.
Now, it's not easy to work with. You can't work with it live because the latency is terrible. It's really not ideal. But it is actually translating your guitar playing into a voice singing Japanese phrases.
Wow. Yeah. And
you can change the setting. It can be a certain poem, and it's a traditional Japanese poem of some sort. I asked someone about it.
Wow.
And or it could be random words, but as far as pedals go, that's pretty amazing.
It is.
Hatsune Miku is a Vocaloid pop star, which is to say she's a cartoon and she's the product of a computer. Oh. But she's a big star in Japan and in other places, playing kind of highly charged pop music, pop dance, techno type music. And so Korg made a pedal of her voice thinking, I don't know what they were thinking because guitar players don't know who Hatsune Miku is. Right. Okay. And if a keyboard player wants to do Vocaloid, they'll just use the computer. Mm-hmm. They'll trigger the samples with their keyboard. And it was a complete flop. However, it spurred several very funny review pedals where people are playing it and laughing because it just sounds ridiculous. And my drummer told me about it. And this song is on my album. And there's also a video that goes along with it, which is outrageous. Right. The video is completely out of control. Right. And it took like weeks to edit. And but you can watch it. And I think it's actually quite a good song.
Yeah. I'll definitely want to go back to it after our interview here. So before we wrap up, could you let the listeners or watchers know where they can find your music, your stuff, your videos, all that sort of good stuff?
Yes. So check that out. I'm on Instagram at SmithCatMRS, like the abbreviation of Mrs. SmithCatMRS. That's me on Instagram. Facebook is Mrs. Smith, all caps. You can't miss me. I'm also on YouTube. Just search Mrs. Smith Guitar and I'll come up. A lot of YouTube rabbit holes to fall down there. And also my website, worldofsmith.com.
Cool. Awesome. I'll leave links to that below so people can find it more easily.
Great. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Mrs. Smith. It was a pleasure having you on.
My pleasure as well. You take care.
You too.
Stay healthy. Stay indoors.
Exactly.
And wash your hands. Okay.
Awesome to have you here, Mrs. Smith. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you, the listener, if you watch this on YouTube, like the interview as well. If you're listening to this interview on Apple Podcast, please leave a rating, subscribe, and all that sort of things. And the same if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, subscribe, and do all those sort of things. Share it if you like it. And leave a comment below if you have any questions or comments for Mrs. Smith or about the interview itself. And also, don't forget to download the free guide, 3 tested ways to increase your client base. Made this guide again for home studio owners or freelancers if you work in a recording studio and you want to increase your client base. Again, learn my tested email script of how to contact bands online, how to get clients coming back for more, and much more. Free guide, enter your email, I send it to you right away. That's it for this week. I see you guys soon.